Hello, once again. Welcome back inside the Tier 4 studio here in Morgantown, West Virginia. Happy New Year to you. We can say that, right? There's no war on Happy New Year, correct? Good. Also, we're still within that awkward, I give it a 5-day window where you can say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy 4th of July if you want. Outside of 5 days, it's a little awkward. But we're in the window, so Happy New Year to you. First time we've seen one another in quite some time. I get questions all the time. Mike, are you going to keep doing the Facebook Live Q&As now the football season's over? It is not a football-specific gimmick. A couple of things you may not know about me. I've only been around this part of the internet, I should say, for a couple of months now. But I speak a couple languages. I'm actually a professor at the College of Media. I'm actually doing my syllabus right now, which is a lot like George and Jerry doing their script for their pilot on Seinfeld. So I was glad to pull myself away for however long we're here today. I make really good pies. I once dunked a basketball. And I actually write about 2 sports, football in the fall and then basketball in the winter. And that's all we have on our plate right now. We have some football, and I'm sure you'll have some questions. And I'm positive that you may have some headlines, perhaps even negative, sometime in the not-too-distant future. That's just the way of the world in college football. I want to say the college football offseason, but really, is college football ever in an offseason? Not with the recruiting calendar and multiple signing days and the transaction trends for coaches and administrators. It never ends. It's always spinning. And it's our job to stay on and not fall off or get flung to the side. So we'll still have some football sprinkled in here and there. A lot of look-back stuff, a lot of look-ahead stuff. But the main lane right now, the left lane, so to speak, as we go toward March, all football aside, basketball going forward. And wow, we've had a couple of eventful days and weeks since the last time you saw me and the last time we spoke. And the biggest news has come lately. The big news, of course, we have an actual date for Issa Ahmad's first appearance, January 13 against Texas Tech. It was one of 2 games we thought, Baylor or Texas Tech all along. Was it a 15-game or a 16-game suspension? How does the NCAA divide half of a 31-game season? That's 15 and a half. Do you round down to 15? Do you round up to 16? Believe it or not, and I'm sorry if I frustrated you or if you were frustrated by just the lack of answers in here, I promise you I tried. I have multiple emails to the NCAA, multiple phone calls to the NCAA. And by the way, I know somebody very well who's quite important in the NCAA, and I could get no answers on this. West Virginia, of course, didn't have an answer until yesterday, and that had come out of nowhere until you had heard on the broadcast against Kansas State in a very oh-by-the-way fashion that West Virginia had mentioned to the broadcasters that they expected Ahmad back for the Texas Tech game. That was arresting to me because that was the first time we actually had not even a definitive statement, but at least a mention of a date in a school. Let's be honest, this was not nearly as hard a nut to crack as it seemed to be. The answer was out there. It was just never shared for whatever reason. If you choose to believe that the NCAA, which is usually open and honest about these things, was just not telling West Virginia stuff, and this was a specific case and something against the Mountaineers, I'm sorry you live and think that way. I think that there was some sort of discourse all along, and there was a question, there was an answer, and you finally arrived at a point where the light was green and it was good to go with that information. I just don't think that you hide information like that from a school, or that a school is deprived that information. Just not how it goes. It's procedural at the NCAA. It's not school-specific. It's always case-specific, and that's how it goes. So he'll be back on the 13th. And really, it's kind of an interesting situation now because what do? He's good enough to start. He's good enough to maybe lead the team in scoring for the rest of the season when you look at the parts around him and how much attention Javon Carter is going to get, deservedly so. So he's going to start. He's going to play 25 minutes a game before this is all said and done. Where do those minutes come from, and who moves aside? I think a lot of people look at the roster and say, well, it means fewer minutes for Chase Harler. It means fewer minutes for, I don't know, perhaps even Beetle Bolden. Who knows, right? Sure, that makes sense, but those are guards. They need to play. They still have a role backing up and giving relief and support to Javon Carter and Dax Miles. 5 starters, you can't have 6. We said Ahmad is good enough to start, so one of the starters has to go. Not going to be Sagaba Konate, not going to be the 2 guards, Miles and Carter. It's going to be Lamont West, or it's going to be Wesley Harris. Who knows how that'll go. Harris has not been great offensively lately. I thought he did a pretty good job defensively against Kansas State's D. Wade the other night. But you can have defense come off the bench. I think offense that Lamont West gives you is a nice compliment, especially when you look at how Ahmad plays and what he brings. He's great in the paint. You can say what you want about his turnovers. Maybe he's not a consistent scorer, an aggressive scorer, but he's a really good passer. And the way teams have played West Virginia this year, they've really kind of stepped on the guard's toes, and you've seen West Virginia try to get the ball inside, down low. Ahmad's very good at that, really good in the paint. And if he can score inside, or if he can get the ball inside and pass it out to shooters, it opens up the offense. It opens up jump shots. It opens up drives. It opens up cuts. He can be a real shot in the arm for the offense, not only in a points per game sense, but in a just general flow of how things go. What'll be interesting to see is not only how many minutes does he play, but when does he actually start? I think he'll probably come off the bench for a few games. You can assume that he's going to have, just some trouble getting his wind back. It's natural. You can practice a lot and you can run a lot. You could be on the treadmill. You could do a Rocky regimen in the mountains if you want to, but that is very different from game shape and the start and stop and the full court press, the timeouts, the catching your breath and then blowing it all out again. That's hard. It's game shape. That's why they call it game shape. It'll take him a couple games. I think if you look at the way players have come back from injuries before, not that this is an injury, Ahmad's obviously not been hurt. He hasn't been, precluded from any physical activity. Probably maybe 1 or 2 games coming off the bench, and then he starts. So I would imagine definitely the first game, maybe the first 2 games he's off the bench. By the time they get Kansas, he should be in the starting lineup, and that would be ideal for West Virginia. However, this is kind of a herky-jerky situation because if you shuffle the deck for a team that, by the way, is number 6 in the country and has won 13 straight games, and then you get all the pieces aligned in a second phase, right? You get Ahmad in the starting lineup and you reappropriate your minutes. Well, then all of a sudden you have Brandon Napper who may be ready to play again too. I think that if a perfect world were available for West Virginia, Ahmad and Napper would be coming back at the exact same time. That's why I think that they're going to be really serious about getting Napper ready, so perhaps he can debut as soon as the 13th. It's just easier to make those 2 changes at once than to make a second change to accommodate Ahmad, get everything settled again, and then make another change to accommodate Napper, because you're really going to have to juggle your lineups. It's not just a matter of playing 13 people instead of 11. You only have 200 minutes, and if you're messing with the rotations and the playing time, how does a player deal with going from 12 minutes to 8? Does he become more aggressive? Does he play harder? Who knows? There's just adjustments there. So let's also keep an eye on Napper and if and when he plays, and by now it seems more like when than if. Got time for plenty of questions for you. I feel like I owe you one, right? Ask away in the room here if you want to. Toby Bolliard is here. Good, Toby. Glad to see that. Have questions? I can obviously see them fire away. I have a couple queued up from our 24/7 sports chat room, or message board right here. The first one here, this is about Saturday's game. Number 6, West Virginia. Number 7, Oklahoma. The Sooners, 11-1, 9 straight wins. Highest scoring team in the country. Highest scoring player. National leader in assists. Perhaps you've heard of Trae Young. If you haven't gotten an eyeful of him, turn on your TV tonight. Watch Oklahoma State. You saw them. Pretty good team. They will take on Oklahoma in the basketball Bedlam game tonight. So what do I think? Over under points and assists for Young Saturday. I think he's going to find his way to 20 just because that's what he does. Assists is what will be probably a good point to keep an eye on, because West Virginia will try to take the ball out of his hands. So keep the ball out of his hands. Maybe try to make him give it up too, but if he's giving it up on the bounce, if he's getting inside and kicking it outside, he's had guys make shots around him. We're talking 11 assists a game. That's pretty good. He had 22 in a game against Northwestern State. A team in white on Saturday night is not going to be Northwestern State, but he's got players around him. That's 22 assists. That means people made 22 shots, not just him. So he can do that. Let's go over under, let's say 19.5 in points. Let's go 7.5 in assists. Let's see how that goes. But I think if you look at 20 points and 7 assists, as crazy as that sounds, that's probably a good job against him. How will they defend him? That's going to be interesting. I wrote about that today a little bit. Obviously, Javon Carter. I think you'll see a lot of Dax Miles in there. Chase him around. Make sure he gets rid of the ball with the press. Maybe you'll fall back, but then you keep the ball from going back into his hands. That's why you're going to have maybe 2 defenders, maybe more, on him throughout the game. And let's see them be tough on him. He's 6'2", he's 180, maybe. Remember Melo Trimble, Maryland, a couple years ago? West Virginia really beat him up in the NCAA tournament. I would suspect not purposely physical play, but ask some questions of him. Can he take some bounces and some bruises, and can he last for 36 minutes? Maybe he gets his in the first half. West Virginia wants to see if he's still standing at the end, and then can he make those jump shots? Can he rip off those passes to get baskets? History prof asks me, after watching Oklahoma versus Georgia, it seems like Oklahoma's defense looked a lot like ours in terms of being less physical than the opposing defense, wearing down and allowing huge runs when defenders were actually in position, and some when they weren't. Am I just trying to equate WVU with OU in order to feel better? Probably. Or do you think that we are back to the issue of a defensive practices against a fast-paced spread and will be susceptible to physical play? Some other questions we'll get back to. It's not that first part out. Oklahoma's defense is prone to that. They don't adjust well throughout games. I think we've been over that before. That's why West Virginia has gashed them sometimes with 300-yard rushing games by one player. They find something that works against Oklahoma, and they keep doing it. If you watch that game against Georgia, 300 yards rushing from two players, right? And how many carries? Not 40. Really just a diet of similar run plays, and it just kept working again and again and again. Oklahoma not known for making adjustments during the game at halftime. So you can find a way to get them out of position. Again, counters and deception plays where you have a guy leaning one way. And what Georgia was very effective with was misdirection stuff, jet sweep action, ghost sweep action, where it pulled a linebacker out of the middle. Oklahoma's got a really good offense. Oklahoma has talent on defense. Well, Oklahoma has some young players on defense too. I thought Georgia really did a good job manipulating the linebackers. But by the way, Georgia's really good running the ball. They did that to SEC teams all year. I don't think we're confusing Oklahoma's defense with Georgia's contemporaries in the SEC. Be careful making the comparisons or drawing conclusions in ink right now with West Virginia's defense because Oklahoma had a bad game. Oklahoma, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, they do gear themselves to play a particular type of defense 9 times a year because that's what you're going to see. It doesn't do you a whole lot of good to get into 3 techniques and play 4-3-5-2 defenses against teams that you suspect are going to run the ball 45 times a game if you're going to have really good quarterbacks and fleet receivers out there. So could be trouble if you prepare one way and you get the other, and life in the Big 12 is generally experienced through the air and not on the ground. So, you're going to have those postseason matchups. That's the trick and the treat of tournament-style football like that. It's the same reason why West Virginia basketball has been good in the past, too. It's hard to prepare for John Beilein's 1-3-1 zone. It's hard to prepare for West Virginia's pressing defense. To extend your question, another conversation, are teams in basketball at a disadvantage because they don't press, or they don't practice against the press? You might not see it very often, but if you're in the Big 12, you might want to spend some time leading up to the West Virginia game or in the preseason or in the non-conference schedule, pressing your guys in practice, and maybe you line up non-conference opponents that do press so you get used to it. West Virginia did that to some extent by scheduling Virginia. They didn't schedule Virginia to get ready for Kansas State, but Virginia's pack line defense, very similar to what Kansas State does. And golly, didn't West Virginia look pretty good offensively against the purple team on Monday night. Second question here. This one comes from M. Burns 40. Can we expect a better running game next year? Or does it really hold us back that Greer isn't a threat to pull it and run himself to keep the backside of the defense honest like we have with Skyler? Yeah, that's going to be something they have to deal with. Greer isn't a runner. They know that. Other teams know that. Maybe he can run, but I think we understand you don't want him running right now. You'd rather keep him in between the tackles or in a situation where he's running forward and not trying to leg out runs to the sideline or the pylon against safeties or linebackers or 300-pound defensive ends and nose guards. You got to find ways to, again, manipulate the defense there. So if they can find ways to shift and to motion and to realign their personnel, that's what they're going to have to do. That's why I think it's so important to get guys who can play different positions. Those tight ends are important, not just because they block, but you can create mismatches. And, if you're motioning a tight end or if you're motioning someone out of the backfield into the slot, it causes trouble. It really tasks the discipline of players who are at that second level of the defense. I think you'll see West Virginia do some shifting and some motion next year because they can and also because they have to. Second question, also from M. Burns 40. Is it unreasonable as WVU fans to expect to play in the Big 12 title game this year? I don't know. Unreasonable? No, it's January 3rd, right? I think you're probably in the conversation. I don't know that you're going to have enough people in the media that will vote West Virginia above Texas or above Oklahoma, but there really is no reason they shouldn't be third place. So then it comes down to a 2-game season. Split one of those two. Hope that one of those two loses another game. You go 8-1, and you're good. So yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable in that sense. Third question: Any plans on writing the sequel to Waiting for the Fall on the demise of Rich Rod's career, and then turning it into the next 30 for 30 documentary? While on that subject, can you give your present thoughts on Rich, and will he ever be able to resurrect his career? I get asked the book question a lot. I've had lots of questions. I've had lots of offers to write a second book. If you're not aware of something else, maybe you didn't know about me. I wrote a book many years ago, Waiting for the Fall, a decade of dreams, drama, and West Virginia football. Check that out, Amazon. It's cheaper now than ever. It's amazing. It was number one on Amazon for a while. But I get questions a lot about that. I've had offers. Haven't had the itch to do it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I suspect if I write, how about this? I suspect when I write a second book, it's not going to be about West Virginia. Try something different. It's quite an undertaking for someone who's busy, like me, I guess. I'm kind of obsessed with putting myself into something all the way. And if I have 3 things to do, can't do 2 of them the way that they deserve to be done. So between a job, 2 jobs, maybe trying to do all the things I do here for you all, it's hard to fit a book in. But also, I don't have the idea to inspire me that much. And you assume that maybe I haven't had conversations about a 30 for 30 before. What about Rich's life, his career? I'm pretty, split on this. I understand the vindictive feelings that some people have right now. I've seen people say karma, he had it coming. I'm kind of different like that. The only problems that I ever had with him are, he kicked me out of the football facility once. He kicked everybody out of the football facility once, and he left out the back door. Didn't return my phone calls a couple times. That's petty professional stuff that comes with the trade. Personally, I never had anything really against him. He's said nice things about me through intermediaries that I found out in the past, so I don't really have an axe to grind with him. So for me, it kind of makes me sad to see what's happened right now. I do think that his statement yesterday, is pretty brave. Let's be honest. The environment right now and, the character that people assume he has, there are going to be certain stereotypes and certain perceptions and images out there that are going to yield themselves to ridicule, to contempt, to point and laugh and say you don't feel sorry for him, and for him to come out and not only address them, but expose them and reveal them and tell you more than he probably needed to tell you, to me is pretty noble. So I respect that out of him. Doesn't mean you have to. I get all the other counter feelings, but there's a lot of times that you see people lie and deceive and hide from these things. He did not. So I give him credit for that. America and sports love a comeback. I think he's excellent on television. He has been in the past. That's a great way to rehabilitate your career. Will it happen for him? I don't know. Perhaps he wants to do some personal maintenance right now. Perhaps he needs to spend time with his family and not in the TV studio or on the road. Who knows? I know people that know him. I have friends that know him. It's a bummer, I think, in some regard right now. And I got to know him and his family a little bit for many years, and you don't wish to see things like that happen. It's something I don't understand, so I really can't say a whole lot about it. But I really hope that, this isn't the end for him, because say what you will about him, college football is pretty cool when he's got a quarterback who's running the zone read and you're seeing, high-scoring games. Khalil Tate was pretty fun this year. Doesn't mean he won't be fun again, but you kind of got a little bit nostalgia. If you're not still mad as hell at him about things, you kind of got a little bit of nostalgia this year watching that offense hum like it did. And I don't know. Perhaps he finds his way back where he needs to, but I think probably right now there's more important things on his plate than his career. Any news on if Brandon Napper will be playing this year? It's also in Burns. I think it's going to happen. I don't think he's practicing just to see how it feels. Now, some things, have to work out for him. Old saying of the body doesn't speak English. It doesn't speak Spanish or Japanese or French or German or Russian either. It doesn't speak. You can tell it what to do. It doesn't mean it's going to do it. You can rehab your knee and do everything you're supposed to do. People heal at different, rates. You can rehab and do things fine, but perhaps you don't recover properly. So right now things will be good for Napper if he can not have swelling and not have any agitation in his knees. And then if he can practice a couple times, perhaps he can play. Again, I think it's going to be interesting to see if they can match his return up with Ahmad's. And if not, then, he's got a redshirt year obviously available. He's a true freshman. But I think if he can help and he can play some minutes, he can take a burden off of Miles and Carter, and even to some extent Bolden and Harler as well. If you're asking me, does he play this year? I think he does. Next question here. Loopy Hoopy asks, do you see Chugs leaving before the start of next season? That's a hot question. That was not a very good performance for him, not only in the bowl game where he had, a bunch of practice, but it wasn't great in the Oklahoma game either. The fact that they had to really adjust their offense because of, maybe what he couldn't do, that's troublesome, I think, in some regard. Also, Jack Allison's pretty good. I think that's going to be something that Juggernaut maybe has to think about. I don't think he's so worried about Trey Lowe taking his job next year, or that he's so worried about David Israel taking his job next year. But does he want to go not only to starting to backing up, but maybe from starting to backing up to being the backup's backup? I don't know. It's a good question yet. Who is WVU starting middle linebacker versus Tennessee? My guess is Ferns. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be David Long. I think they like his playmaking ability and his TFL potential outside, so that'll stay there. It's not Dylan Tonkery, so then you're going to if-then scenarios. If it's not those two, then who is it? Maybe Benton, the linebacker, not Al Rashid, but Benton, the recruit who should be here in January. Perhaps he does very well in the spring and he can go. Ferns was kind of coming along last year before he got hurt on special teams. This will be his third year in the program. There's really no reason he shouldn't. He's been close twice to being on the field for significant roles. So that would be my pick. I would watch Benton as well. Wild card, probably Austin Hensley. That's one of those third-year linebackers who's been around that Tony Gibson seems to really like, and he just hasn't had a chance to get on the field because Al Rashid Benton never comes off. Basketball, thoughts on Kansas winning the Big 12 regular season this year? They looked very soft versus Texas Tech last night. Texas Tech is nails. That's a really good team that if you saw them last year, you thought, holy cow, this coach is good. These guys are, juniors, sophomores, they're going to get older and better. Well, they are older and better. The coach hasn't gotten worse. They went into Kansas and pushed that team around. Until Kansas doesn't win it, and it looks like they're eliminated, I'm not going to say that they're not going to win it. That would still be my pick. They have some players who haven't played yet, like, Preston, and I cannot pronounce the fellow's name, who is waiting to be cleared by the NCAA, but you're talking two, five-star guys who can play. Bill Self's still a Hall of Fame coach. I would be surprised if they didn't win the Big 12 this year. I also think that you can't discount the fact that there are probably 4 other teams that will make runs at this, which means you're going to bloody each other's noses. Someone's going to be left standing because, people were getting punched in their periphery, and they'll climb up that ladder rung by rung. And wouldn't that be funny if Kansas sneaked in the back door and won another Big 12 title here? Johnny Dickens, is Napper back? Don't know yet. Like we've talked about that already. Who are some of the recruits that WVU is targeting for the February signing period? That's interesting. I think they want to get a defensive lineman, probably somebody on the inside, but also on the outside too if they can. I'd look for linebackers too. Obviously, Gray, the Missouri commit, is no longer committed to Missouri, but he has the offer from Michigan, and that's a meaningful thing to him. That's kind of backyard stay-at-home stuff there. I think West Virginia is maybe out on that one, so they're going to look for cornerbacks too. They're pretty good at scouring, the old waiver wire this time of year. They're plugged into junior colleges, so they can find somebody maybe that's available for January, perhaps the summer. Also, postgraduate players. They've had a pretty good run of, maybe the results haven't been great, but when you look back at guys who've come in for that 5th year and played cornerback, it's worked out pretty well for them this year too. Maybe not this year. It's worked out pretty well for them through the years too, was what I meant to say. Perhaps not as well this year with Corey Winfield, but he had some important games for them too. The names, it's tough to find right now. We'll see. I think that's probably the 1-2 positions they want to find help at, defensive line and cornerback. If they can find someone who can play linebacker too, I think that would be an addition that they would certainly welcome. But really, elsewhere, they kind of have things sewn up, pretty securely, I think, on offense and defense because of the early signing period, so not much work left to do there. Glenn Pauly, watching and listening in Richmond, Virginia. Cool. Say hello to my sister, please. And also Chris Anderson, my tag team partner here, and Brandon Phoenix, raspy voice kids in the building. Good to know. All the questions you have for me, all the answers I have for you. I'll give you one more second to lob one up at the rim and see if I can slam dunk it before the time runs out. Otherwise, we'll punch it out here, call it a day, and come back this time next week. And then I'll go have some of, you probably can't read this, it's backwards, huh? Jobu's rum. Very excited about baseball season soon. Not soon enough, I guess. So that's it for this time. I will see you next time for 24/7 Sports. I am Mike Casazza.